the different arguments for using small n designs. That was what we said. Sometimes, well, they're useful because you get that individual subject validity like we just saw. So you can say that you have that. That's probably one of the biggest advantages. You can also get some more detailed information about performance. Anytime you're using fewer subjects, you tend to get more detail. There's a trade-off there. So you'll need to know the characteristics of all these different single subject designs. If you recall, we talked about all these things: A, B, A, B, A, A, B, A, B. Remember, A is the baseline, B is the treatment. So you'll need to know what those are. The only one that we didn't go over in class that's going to be on the test is ABCD. So it would be good to know what the C is in that. And that one is in your textbook. This is called this is actually similar to the changing criterion design, but it's used with reinforcement. So the idea is that, let's say you want to get someone to, you want to reward someone when they perform a particular behavior. Well, so maybe when someone is on an exercise bike, you give them a reward whenever they reach a certain RPM on the bike. Right? Well, the C in that gives them a reward, but it doesn't depend on their performance. And so the reason for that is that you might see a change in behavior just because they got a reward, even if the reward isn't contingent on their performance. So if you give somebody a reward, they feel good, right? And then their behavior might change as a result of that. There's a detailed example of that and a detailed outline of that in your textbook, but just make sure that you understand what that's all about. And case studies, of course, are just studies of very, very detailed studies of a single individual. We talked about Phineas Gage, these studies on animals like Coco the gorilla and Kanzi the chimp, who learn a lot of language, but it takes forever to teach them the language. So you can, and we also talked about the John Jones example, sex reassignment at birth. Very rare cases that you just can't practically or ethically get a sample that big. Finally, chapter 12. I know we're down to like 5 minutes left. Observational and survey research. You know the difference between naturalistic and participant observation. Remember, naturalistic, you're just watching. Participant, the researcher actually gets involved in some way, like when they, Festinger and colleagues they got into that cult and started interacting with the cult members. That's another study that you'll need to know a lot about. Make sure you know about all these other studies that are listed there: observing parents and children in the Science Museum, the altruistic behavior in children. Remember, that was an example of a structured observational study where they gave children a situation in which they had the opportunity to be helpful. How can observer bias be reduced? Through non-intrusive measures. Okay. So if people don't know they're being observed, they should behave naturally. What are unobtrusive measures? One of the examples that we gave was from Cialdini, good old Robert Cialdini. He used the whether people kept or littered these political flyers that were put on their cars. So that's just something people don't think. Somebody's going to observe me taking this flyer or throwing it on the ground. So you wouldn't expect that to change their behavior. Why do observational researchers calculate inter-observer reliability scores? Well, because individual observers might be biased, and so that if you can show that multiple observers generally agree on what they've observed, that's good evidence that their observations are pretty reliable. So if you've got a 90% agreement between 2 or 3 observers, then that's going to be pretty good for your study. However, if everybody says that they saw different things, then that might mean you've got a problem with your operational definition or something like that. Let's see. structured observational study, that was the example of the supersuit study that I just mentioned, that some structure is provided to the situation. Difference between probability and non-probability sampling. So a non-probability sample was just like a convenience sample. Probability sample, you're saying that there is some specific probability of being included in the sample. So with the random sample, we said that everybody has an equal chance, everybody in the population has an equal chance of being in the sample. So just know about those different sample types. Simple random sampling, cluster sampling, stratified. We talked briefly about the different approaches to administering a survey, interview, face-to-face interview, over the phone, paper and pencil, and then online. So just have a general understanding of those. Open versus closed / structured questions. So remember, if it's a closed question, there's just either a yes/no answer, or there's some structure provided, like a scale of 1 to 7, something along those lines. If it's an open question, you can answer it in a wide variety of ways. So that's more qualitative research. Just be able to identify those. Oh, we're almost done. We're almost out of time, too. Know about some sources of problems in survey research. We gave the example of the bias sample in the 1936 presidential election. They had a bias sample there. Social desirability bias. People want to look good to the researchers, so they present themselves in a positive light. Types of poorly written questions. We went over some examples of that. You have to avoid asking questions in biased ways. You don't want to ask leading questions. Go over those examples. What is demographic information? What's that?
Gender, ethnicity.
Yeah, it's this basic identifying information, like gender, sex, race, nationality, things like that. That's usually included in demographics. And remember, you want to give those at the end of your survey. So, any questions? All as exhausted as I am? All right, well, we're out of time for today, so I'll let you go. And I guess I won't see you again until the final exam. So if you think of any other questions about the study guide, just let me know, and I'll answer you over email. Or you can come in and meet with me. I have office hours, so see you later.